Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Comic Chronicle Podcast. I'm your guys' host, Dakota Morgan, coming to you from Phoenix, Arizona. Today is not an episode where Gavin is joining me. Today is actually just a interview episode, believe it or not. So we have on today some really fun people. Some of the workers and the writers on Planet Divock 91. In case that didn't sound familiar, it's all about actually the COVID pandemic and the storylines and people's lives and all sorts of crazy shit that's going on in the world with it. So today we have on, coming all the way from the UK, Hannah Berry and Sarah Kenny. We talk all sorts of things with the book, and webtoons, turning into comics, as well as going in and talking about science as well, and maybe using comic books to show off science and actually talk about science a little bit more. And we'll get into it. I don't want to butcher it. So welcome, folks, again. And of course, if you like what you listen to, stay tuned for new episodes every Friday on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you guys are listening to the podcast. Catch us on there. And yeah, for either interviews, aka just conversations with people from comics, or as well little news segments called the Newsroom, the new thing that's been just recently started, and we're trying to get a hold of and do some fun things for. So stay tuned for that. And of course, folks, yeah, I'm on Twitch, Dakota97, Twitter, DakotaMorgan3, and Instagram at Dakota_Morgan97. And without further ado, though, let's get into our talk. Yeah, Jellybean. I mean, I haven't eaten them in a while, but yeah, I tend to change that for a little bit. But I should say, Hannah and Sarah, it is an honor to have you here. I started kind of the same way with every episode, though. It is an honor to have you here, by the way, because you guys are actually very ambitious people in the comic book world right now. Yeah, I don't know. To me, it is. I mean, with your guys' book, I mean, go ahead and talk about it real quickly here so people may recognize it or where they can go find it.
Sure. So, I mean, it all started, gosh, looking back, it's like 2020.
20 years ago.
It feels it. Oh, it feels it.
I feel like I've aged 20 years since then, put it that way.
Yeah.
I was kind of sitting, actually, at UCL chatting to a colleague, Bella Starling, who were working on another project, and we were waiting to hear about the lockdown and stuff on the news, telling people what to do, where to get information from, and when the lockdown happened, we were thinking about how there's nothing really in terms of sort of hearing from young people and their voices, and it was impacting them so severely. So the initial discussion was, why don't we do some research kind of tell us, a bit more about what they're thinking and feeling. So it started really small, and then just over time, we went to various funders, and it sort of scaled up to a fully fledged Exquisite Corpse comic. And one of the key things we wanted to do was disciplinary art, so that's sort of running workshops with young people, where we bring in scientists, historians, sociologists, have conversations about what they're thinking, and then that to the comics creators. Well, actually, Hannah, you came to one of the sessions.
I dialed in. Yeah, it was all because everything was remote, and like it still is. But it was the early days of remote dialing into things. It felt fresh and new and exciting. Yeah, it was. I was going to say it's just really. It was such a nice aspect of the project to have all these experts, because I don't know about anybody else, but I feel like I work in comics. I know pretty much everything there is to know. And then it's nice to be shown that actually I don't. There are people who know more than me, and by the way, you can use this information that other people have and bring it into your work. So you don't have to make a complete tool of yourself.
That's so humbling to hear. You have no idea. In America, we never hear anybody say that anymore, so that's very humbling to hear.
Well, apparently in the UK we're sick of experts, so we brought that on ourselves.
Yeah.
Look at the state we're in.
Oh, I take that mentality to heart, because you never know truly everything, because when I'm not doing stuff in comics and media, I work in the animal field in all sorts of different aspects, like a sanctuary, animal ambulance. So trust me, because there's people even in that position who are like, oh, we know everything. Like, you never know everything. There's no way at all.
What's that? It's like a sort of a mental fallacy where you think you know. Oh, what's it called? I think it's you. It's
cockiness. There is that, but
that was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Oh, do you know what? Remember, as soon as we finish this call, it's going to come to my mind. There's something where
Yeah.
you think it's like a syndrome where if you're an expert in one area, it gives you the belief that you're an expert in all of the areas. We can explain lots of modern politics with this. Oh, I wish I remember what it's called.
Oh, we're gonna remember it when we get
Yeah,
off. You're absolutely right. It's gonna be.
it was
It's
a really
funny.
good one as well.
Yeah, you do come across that a lot, actually. Sort of like I really love working with experts, but what I enjoy actually is when you talk to different experts about the same subject, you will get
Yeah.
very different opinions.
Mm.
Like they're looking at the world through different lenses, particularly if you're comparing scientists versus a philosopher versus a
Yep.
historian. And that was one thing we wanted to bring into the space when we were chatting to, the young people, writers, was
Yeah.
what do they bring to their view on this subject when they come from a very different view of thought. And it is interesting because I do think you're right. There are some experts who think they can know everything. But,
Yeah, but I mean, so you guys were really, really on top of it. So in the world of chaos at the time, like you guys were all like, "Hey, we can actually do something with this." Well, most of us had no idea what to do because the apocalypse is happening.
That
It
was
was
entirely
really,
Sarah because Sarah's a powerhouse of organisation and planning and strategy.
yeah, and think like absolutely, like that's some brain power I wish I would have had back in 2 years ago. Instead, we had like no idea what was going on.
I mean,
But
it's kind of weird saying that because at the time I was having a bit of an epic meltdown personally because I was I work in telly and science engagement and I'd had contracts falling through and I was not working on anything specific and I was like, oh my god. So my background's science engagement and I did science communication and I was like I've got to do something in this. So I guess in a way it was a little bit. I think for a lot of us, it was actually quite cathartic to come together as a community of people and try and do something. And the fact was, it wasn't like a normal project where you plan it, try and get funding, and have sort of ideas about what it's going to be, and then you get the money and you do it. It was a sort of emerging project that the conversations we had, or funders came on board, spoke to different people. It really changed and more. And I think, part of it was trying to figure out how we get the young people involved even more and bring, one of them came in and wrote a chapter, Polisa from South Africa. And so it was, I don't know, I don't feel like it was the most structured, well-organised project I've ever worked on.
the best things never are though. That's the secret to anything, any art form, is that if the more structured it is, the more it's never going to be too great. But the less structured it is, the more chaotic, the more beautiful it is. I don't know what it is about it, but it's always a thing. Whether in comics and in film, like even the best of movies, you're like, oh, it must have been so organized on set, and Spielberg would come out and be, oh no, it was absolute madhouse. It's like you're like, oh okay.
Yeah, it has like an organic feel about it.
Yeah, yeah.
An organic chaos.
Yes, yes. Now, to people who may not know, Sarah and Hannah, where were you guys before this project in this book, though? Where were you guys? What were you up to? Like, what's kind of a thing? And maybe to this day, what are you guys up to?
Go on, Sarah, you go first.
I'll go first. Yeah. So I actually was just at the end of a 2-year fellowship, a Wellcome Trust Engagement Fellowship, which is that they're sort of like a medical charity in the UK, and they at the time were kind of funding to explore ideas around health. And I was exploring stuff around comics and health, and also sort of podcast stuff. So I've spent 2 years basically doing a lot of research in this area. So sort of looking at what happens when you run a workshop rather than just going, hey, come and draw some pictures, sort of what happens. Bring scientists and artists and public into the same space. How do you have a dialogue that feels equitable in a way? Because I think often if you meet medical people, it's in a medical situation where you get 10 minutes of their time and they're telling you really stuff and it's not an equal situation. So a lot of the workshops I was running was putting surgeons in a room and people from all sorts of different backgrounds and them just having conversations and seeing what came out of that and how not just it was about the audience learning stuff, it was about the surgeons and the historians and the scientists learning from the public and how it would change their practice. And we had loads of stuff that came out of it. So I was doing that, and then I was working on a couple of film projects as well. I was doing some work for a film and TV charity. I kind of have my bread and butter work, which pays the bills, which is
Yeah.
TV stuff, and then the comics engagement stuff is
The dessert.
it's kind of like, it's the stuff that you do a lot of in kind work, shall we say, on it, but it's the stuff that I really enjoy. So so that's what I was doing at the time. And I was working on another project called One, which was exploring community immunity, immunisation, and that we're launching that actually in November at the Health Conference in South Africa.
Very nice. Very nice.
Another one with an amazing South African artist.
Very cool. So some really crazy out there great work is what I'm hearing.
It's quite intimidating, to be honest.
Yeah, a little bit. God damn.
Well, I just make comics.
On a paper, Hannah was did tell them about your graphic medicine project, Hannah.
Well, yeah, actually, which I got through Sarah, funnily enough. I've just been working with a group of medics and academics on this shame in medicine project, and they were trying to find a way to illustrate shame in a sort of in a narrative format, in a way that can be understood by other doctors. I think that the whole idea behind the project was to use shame as a way of as a way of learning as a doctor and going forwards, and not as a way to self-flagellate and then just quit because you failed as a human being. And I think I got this job because I told them I feel ashamed all the time anyway. So I get it. I understand. I mean, my mistakes might not lead to death, but I do feel a lot of shame. And so yeah, I've worked on this comic, and it's based on this doctor's account. Oh God, her name has gone from my brain. Okay, I'll stick it. I'll remember that as well. Olivia Davis, Dr. Olivia Davis. It's her story when she was a trainee, and not to brag or anything. It's just been published in the New England Journal of Medicine.
Oh, you know what? We'll start. I'll be clapping for both of you guys because those are both huge accomplishments.
Thank you.
I think it's brilliant. I think more academics should work with comic artists, comic writers to kind of share their work, and it's one of the things I really want to sort of push and encourage more, because I think they're so complicated, these papers, and the jargon, and it's just not necessary. I think, and it is hard to make complex ideas simple. It is really hard, but I think and scientists should be working with artists, writers, because actually most of this work is funded by us, right? Most of us, our taxes pay for a lot of this sort of grant-funded work. So I really think that it should be unlocked more.
Yeah.
In a way that they understand it and use it.
Yeah, and it would be nice if comics was funded.
Yes. Oh boy, that's preaching to a big choir right there. That is a huge. Oh. Well, I mean, it's absolutely true though, and that's why when I had the chance and I was reached out to have you guys on the show, I was like, absolutely, because that's what I love about it, and I love that idea, and you're starting to see more of it. Is artists in comics and science. Paleo art's a big part of it. I follow paleontology a lot. I used to work in a fossil lab here in the States, so I really, really enjoy, like, if that's how they're like, oh, the skeleton, but then you put paleo art to it, and it changes everybody's mood on everything. Like, the people look at a skeleton and they have no idea what it means, what's going on, but then when you do the artwork of it, that changes a whole mood, a whole mindset. It gets more people involved. But so when you do that with projects, any science project, no matter biology or psychology, but absolutely right. Like, the more you do with art, the more people it reaches, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting you say that, particularly about the paleontology stuff, because if you look back historically, like, we were less, sort of the arts and the scientists were less separated, and so you had, like, sort of Darwin, had quite a pure fighting style, and other sort of scientists would do beautiful drawings to go with their work. And I think it was sort of around, early 1900s, you had this sort of desperation of science to try and remove the person even from the science papers. So it wasn't I did this, or I observed that, or I saw that. The idea is they changed the language to make science feel more objective. And so
I thought of that.
If you look back at the history of art stuff, it's interesting, by removing the person, it makes science feel really, really objective. Of course not, it's still a person observing and doing these things. But before that, scientists would write about I observed this and I saw this. And as soon as you got that sort of separation, you got the sort of evolution of this sort of new complicated language that meant that
like a distinction. It's like quite a barrier between for a lot of people to understand. Obviously not me because I know everything, but it's quite a big barrier to understanding a lot of sciences.
Maybe it's a personal thing. I'm thinking maybe like hearing this, it sounds like a personal thing about it, so people can actually relate to it. Like it's a relation factor of I can relate to it because it's me. Like I like, oh, maybe like I found that, or maybe it's the thing of like, oh, it's just another smart person I can never be. But wait, no, maybe that could actually be me finding something along those lines, or discovering this, or writing about this. I think it's that whole connectivity that sometimes we miss in science, and you're absolutely right, we do need more of that.
Yeah, and I think as soon as you say I did this, it becomes a narrative, and I think that's how we connect with a lot of the world around us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Story form.
That people want to know the science. They don't want the autobiography. They want the science. That's what's going on. Wow.
Little column A, little column B.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You do want your name on it, though. I get that. 100% you do want that. Shoot, I've been in the middle of it, too, right now, and doing a research paper on crocodilians at the moment. So that's been a fun fact. Yeah, we've been, because I care for them at a sanctuary. So even here in Arizona, where I'm at, in Phoenix, in U.S., our winters still somewhat get cool in water temperature. So how do you care for them at a wildlife sanctuary where we have about 50 or so crocodilians at this point, of alligators all the way to Niles, to Chinese alligators, like Cubans? How do we care for hatchlings all the way to adults in the desert winter? So that's a research paper going on right now, since I'm one of the few people who actually can do that here in the desert. So
you do it in comic format.
I'm debating whether or not to do that. I don't want to say too much.
Okay, no, sorry. I don't want to put you on the spot there.
No, you're good.
But you should.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, trust me, you guys are a big inspiration for that right now.
So how do you overwinter them? Do you have to just let them slow down? They don't hibernate, do they?
Brumation, so like that hibernation-esque sort of thing. They eat only once every 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it's involving a whole lot of heaters. It involves a whole lot of insulation, nursery tubs. It involves water changes.
Can you get those blankets like a blanket with a little sleeve? Can you get those?
We kind of, actually, in a way, yes, we could. But it like so much of it changes with them, and how you actually can, like, as a sanctuary, you're not rolling around in money. So how does one do that when you're on a budget and using a whole lot of heat, like a heat stick? But what do you use to make a PVC pipe heater that's protected, that can go into the water, that they can bite the hell out of and not destroy?
It doesn't electrocute them.
Yes. Oh, that too. Yeah, that's a huge part of it, and making sure checking and what it means at nighttime versus daytime, and the feeding patterns, and just a whole lot of it. So people can stay tuned for that. That's going to be coming up here in the next few months.
Nice.
What is brumation again? I remember I worked on this funny little project for children's BBC, which was science, and it was about, one of mine was called "What Would Happen If I Turned Into a Lizard."
Oh.
It's like
sing us the song. Sing us the song.
The other one was what would happen if the world was flat. So I was kind of covering lizards and flat Earth at the same time. So I was into conspiracy theory.
That's a deep hole.
Hibernation is, what was that? What's the difference between that and hibernation again?
Hibernation, so it's this mostly is going to be sleeping. So when brumation goes, the animal's still awake. They're still able to move, but they don't move as much. So they move very, very little throughout the day. You're not going to see too much of hunting patterns at all, depending on the animal. You're not going to see too much of gathering at all. You're going to see it mostly just relaxation. They're not going to come after you. They're going to be watching, of course, and be defensive if need to be. But they're awake, and they're just like the body goes. It's like a relaxing Sunday day. You just don't want to get up and start moving. That's really what it is. They don't have it, so they're not burning as much calories due to that. They're kind of saving it up to stay warm, or saving it up due to use.
Yeah, storing our calories.
Like literally at my desk with a duvet around me.
staring. I'm staring at my screen, not moving my hand at all, not working, just looking.
Oh,
I guess I'll shuffle off to bed.
I should make it clear. I was with you guys a little bit. I grew up in Illinois for 16 years, where we'd get like about 10 inches of snow and negative 20 degree. And I was a foolish kid who did Boy Scouts and would go camping in negative 20-degree weather in a tent.
No.
So yeah, to learn survival skills and to adapt to and learn nature and and freeze instead of at
I think
least.
over here, most of our survival skills are grumbling about it. That's how we feel.
Is that it? We do that here too. Don't count us out. If there's one thing Americans are good at, it's grumbling these days. Okay, we know that for a fact. Oh, boy. But so you guys were working on this, and where can they find your guys' book though currently? Because there's some new developments with it. Because it was a webcomic at a certain point, and there's some new things that happening.
Yeah, and it was really interesting when we first started on chapter 1. We were having sort of conversations with James Devlin, the colorist and designer for it all, and Charlie Adlard, who was the artist on chapter 1 and designed all the characters. It was like, how do we do it on Webtoons? Because obviously most people do it with like a singular strip where you scroll up. And actually, because we're quite, I was going to say professional parts, but basically...
How dare you!
That wasn't included.
And everybody hated you ever since. For some unknown reason, was excluded from the project.
No, but like the idea of like being able to print it and being able to have like, you know, sort of a not the sort of scrolling up version. So when we I mean, I'm not sure if it did this much favours on Webtoons, not having that scrolling up, but the plan was always it would be really nice for young people, for the so we after it had finished, we went back to the funders and said, look, can you got please sir, can we have some more to do the print edition and pay the designers and stuff. So, and then finding a publisher. I mean, what was interesting, because with the comic, I worked with Joe Muggs, who's like a music journalist in the UK, brilliant music journalist, to help us curate people to do playlists for each of the chapters. So each of the chapters has a brilliant musician, DJ, producer who has done an hour-long playlist to go with each chapter, and they're from the UK, South Africa, and India. And what we thought was that we would do interviews, so that the print comic has got interviews from all musicians about what their experience was like during the pandemic.
Oh.
So we went to a music publisher actually called Velocity Press, and the guy there who runs it was just brilliant and said, yep, absolutely, we'll publish this for